Lions Campbell halts practice after star teammates spar. The Detroit Lions are still weeks away from meaningful football, but that hasn't stopped their competitive juices from flowing at training camp. For the second consecutive day, head coach Dan Campbell abruptly shut down practice after skirmishes broke out among his players, this time featuring two of the team's brightest young stars, wide receiver Amon-Ra St. and safety Brian Branch. Tensions boil over early. According to the Athletic's Colton Pouncey, multiple heated exchanges erupted during the early portion of Tuesday's session. Open quote. Dan Campbell stopped practice today after several scuffles broke out in the early portion. Brian Branch and Amon-Ra St. went at it multiple times. Second day in a row, practice was stopped. On Tuesday, it was for tackling in shorts. Pads go on tomorrow. They're ready. Close quote. On Monday, a torrid start to practice saw the team drilling in shorts and shells when rough but legal tackling sparked a similar stoppage. Yesterday, however, the lightning rod incident involved two of Detroit's cornerstone playmakers. Players involved: Amon-Ra St. WR. Emerging as one of the NFL's premier slot receivers, St. led the league in receptions last season. Known for his relentless work ethic, he sets a tone by constantly battling defenders on offense and, occasionally, in practice. Brian Branch. The 2023 first-round pick blossomed into Detroit's enforcer in the secondary, finishing as a Pro Bowler and earning All-Pro consideration in his rookie year. Branch's ball-hawk instincts and hard-hitting style have made him a fan favorite but also a practice field pest for receivers. When these two calibers of talent lock horns, it's a sign that intensity is sky-high, even before pads hit the ground. Campbell's philosophy. Dan Campbell has never been one to shy away from on-field edge. In previous stops, first as a position coach in New Orleans, then as head coach in Detroit, Campbell has embraced fiery practices as the crucible in which contenders are forged. He believes that controlled combat fosters resilience, physicality, and a winning mentality. Open quote, "We want that energy. We want guys who compete. We want that edge. But once it's too much, we step in and we reset." Close quote. By stopping practice, Campbell sends a clear message. Passion is welcome, but respect and safety come first. In a high-stakes league where fine margins separate winners from losers, he's determined to channel his team's fire into production on Sunday afternoons, not ejections or injuries in pads. Why this matters. 1. A sign of buy-in. Young rosters often struggle with urgency. The Lions' willingness to scrap, even in non-contact drills, speaks to the buy-in Campbell and staff have cultivated. Veterans and rookies alike are clearly invested in pushing each other to the limit. 2. Preview of physical identity. Detroit ranked top 5 in defensive takeaways and allowed the fewest explosive pass plays in 2024. Tuesday's showdown between Branch and St. hints that the Lions intend to play smash-mouth football on both sides of the ball. 3. Culture-building practices that occasionally boil over, then immediately reset under firm leadership, build a culture of accountability. Players learn to self-regulate. Go hard, but don't go too far. As the calendar turns to Friday, padded practices begin. That's when drills truly get intense, and full-contact competition teaches lessons no walkthrough can. Campbell will almost certainly allow his starters to absorb the energy, though he'll watch for any reckless hits that cross the line. Supporting cast members: cornerback Jack Jones, linebacker Malcolm Rodriguez, and emerging pass rusher Josh Paschal will all get their chance to mix it up too. But the spotlight will remain on St. and Branch. Can they channel this passion into a championship blueprint? If Detroit's season hinges on relentless physicality and a fearless mindset, then Tuesday's scuffle is less a problem and more important. The Lions aren't just practicing football, they're perfecting the art of war. And if they can keep their discipline in check, that same competitive spark might just propel them into the playoff conversation in 2025. The Detroit Lions training camp hit a boiling point this week when head coach Dan Campbell was forced to halt practice twice in as many days due to on-field scuffles. On Thursday, the flashpoint involved two of Detroit's brightest stars. Wide receiver Amon-Ra St. and defensive back Brian Branch sparring repeatedly during early drills. According to the Athletic's Colton Pouncey, Campbell intervened soon after the tension boiled over. Open quote, Dan Campbell stopped practice today after several scuffles broke out in the early portion. Brian Branch and Amon-Ra St. Brown went at it multiple times. Second day in a row practice was stopped. On Tuesday, it was for tackling in shorts. Pads go on tomorrow. They're ready. Close quote. This isn't merely undisciplined behavior. In fact, it's often a sign of a team bristling with competitive fire, especially one like the Lions that enters camp under legitimate Super Bowl expectations for the first time in decades. Monday's shorts-only tackling drills also spilled over into controlled chaos, prompting Campbell to remind the roster that emotional energy must be channeled productively. Why it matters. Both St. Brown and Branch are cornerstone contributors on opposite sides of the ball. St. Brown, coming off a career-high 1,634 receiving yards in 2024, is the engine of a passing attack that ranked third in the NFL last season. Branch, a Pro Bowl talent in his second year, helped elevate Detroit's secondary into the top half of the league. When two franchise pillars clash, it magnifies both the stakes and the potential payoff, channeling that intensity into trap-setting blocks, contested catches, or lockdown coverage. Camp culture under Campbell. Dan Campbell has long cultivated a Battle Monday ethos in Detroit where physicality and fight are celebrated. Last year, a mid-camp free-for-all between linemen set the tone for one of the league's stingiest defenses. This week's skirmishes are an extension of that blueprint. Except now, the Lions must learn the boundary between feisty and flag-worthy. Campbell's swift practice shutdowns underscore his insistence on accountability. Players will compete hard, but only within the framework of team drills. What comes next? With pads going on Friday, the Lions will have a new outlet for their aggression. Properly harnessed, this frustrated energy could translate into explosive starts, sharper red zone execution, and a no-fly attitude in the secondary. Safeties, linebackers, and even special teams units will feed off the titans of effort set by St. Brown and Branch. Ultimately, these scuffles, while headline-grabbing, may prove a blessing in disguise. If Detroit can temper its recklessness without dulling its edge, the Lions could carry this white-hot competitive spirit into the regular season and beyond. Camp fights become cage matches, become gridiron glory only when managed right, and the 2025 Lions look primed to strike that balance. Lions Campbell halts practice after star teammates spar. The Detroit Lions are still weeks away from meaningful football, but that hasn't stopped their competitive juices from flowing at training camp. For the second consecutive day, head coach Dan Campbell abruptly shut down practice after skirmishes broke out among his players, this time featuring two of the team's brightest young stars, wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown and safety Brian Branch. Tensions boil over early. According to The Athletic's Colton Pouncey, multiple heated exchanges erupted during the early portion of Tuesday's session. Open quote. Dan Campbell stopped practice today after several scuffles broke out in the early portion. Brian Branch and Amon-Ra St. Brown went at it multiple times. Second day in a row, practice was stopped. On Tuesday, it was for tackling in shorts. Pads go on tomorrow. They're ready. Close quote. On Monday, a torrid start to practice saw the team drilling in shorts and shells when rough but legal tackling sparked a similar stoppage. Yesterday, however, the lightning rod incident involved two of Detroit's cornerstone playmakers.